Protesters trying to stop plans for a third runway at Heathrow have set up a camp nearby. They oppose the expansion of air travel because they say it would contribute to climate change. BAA, which runs the airport, said today that any action by the protesters, which distracted the police from protecting Heathrow from terrorists, would be irresponsible and unlawful. The MP, John McDonnell, said many local people supported the protest as long as it remained peaceful.
This draws attention to the devastation a third runway would cause to my constituency. Remember, 10,000 people's homes could be at risk. 3 primary schools being demolished, our local churches. At one point in time, they wanted to put the third runway over our local graveyard where we'd have to dig up our dead. I also support the issue around the climate change that they're trying to highlight.
First, though, let's take you to the climate change protest at Heathrow. For PM, Tulip Mazumdar is there.
Well, there's been a steady trickle of campaigners arriving here throughout the day. As I look across the field, around 100 tents are set up on the disused land, which is about half a mile north of Heathrow and backs onto BAA, which is Heathrow's owners' head offices. Now, protesters are staying here under squatting laws. This land is actually is owned by Imperial College London. I've just been speaking to them a few moments ago, and they told me they're keeping an eye on the situation, but no plans to evict the people here or to take any legal action at this stage. Now, around 200 or so protesters have arrived here so far, ahead of a week of action planned from tomorrow. They're using solar and wind energy to power the site here. We've been seeing large trucks coming in, carrying tents and other big equipment. They are here for the next 7 days. And they're here because they're angry about government plans for a third runway at Heathrow. They say the carbon emissions from the extra flights would be a disaster for the environment. But earlier, when I was at Heathrow, I was speaking to passengers there, and a few told me that climate change wasn't really a consideration when they booked the flights.
I guess probably didn't think about it at all because in my 2 weeks of my holiday is the most important things for me at all. I wanted to go away and get brown. Really, I think protesting against the expansion of Heathrow, I'd rather it just be contained in Heathrow rather than be expanded with new airports around London.
We have to be aware that there's obviously major issues with climate change, but I don't travel a lot, I don't travel with work, this is my first holiday of the year, and therefore, I think it's important people get out there and know what's going on. But at the same time, I guess because we don't see the first-hand effects, we're not so aware of it.
Well, with me now is London PhD student Matthew Robbins. Matthew, 6 days of discussions and debates here on the site, then a 24-hour day of action on Sunday. What will you be doing exactly that day?
Well, it's difficult to know at the moment because the people who are actually going to be on the camp are the people who are going to decide what we do on that day. What we have got is a few set arrangements beforehand that we've decided we're not going to go onto runways and we're not going to go airside. We don't want to put anyone in danger, including the passengers, the staff who work at Heathrow, the police, or indeed ourselves. So that's not going to happen. We've also said that our major quarrel isn't with individuals. It's about the aviation industry itself that's pushing for a huge expansion. I mean, to build a third runway at a time of climate crisis is absolute madness. This isn't about holidaymakers, this is about the aviation industry and government policy. You say that, but by disrupting BAA, you will be disrupting passengers. No, as I've just stated, our intention is not to do that in any way, shape or form. What we're trying to do here is raise the issues to the general public and try and increase the awareness that aviation cannot continue. We're talking about 150,000 deaths from climate change every year. If we keep going at the rate we're going, then the Stern Review says that climate change will, as a result in over 400 million deaths. That's not acceptable. 1,600 police officers will be policing this over the next week. BAA have described, that they're worried about possible terrorist threats. I mean, clearly at the moment we're at a high terror threat level. 4 forces are involved with policing this. Do you really think that's fair? Police have said they have adequate numbers to police this. What is happening here is you have government and the industry itself using terrorism yet again as a front to put people off from protesting. That's because they don't want to address the real issue. They're not addressing the real issue, which is climate change, and airport expansion cannot continue if we are to address climate change.
OK, well, thank you very much for coming to see us here, Matthew Roberts, who's taking part in the campaign. Now, hundreds of officers have been involved with policing this site. They've been using anti-terror laws to stop and search demonstrators, and they say they'll continue to take a tough line with anyone intent on anything more than peaceful process. There have been no problems here yet, but the main day of action is, of course, on Sunday, and organisers here are predicting a lot more people, up to 2,000 demonstrators.
Tulip Mazumdar reporting live from Heathrow. Will the camp succeed in its aims of making the public rethink its attitude to flying? I've been hearing from Dr. Patrick Devine-Wright, who's an environmental psychologist at the University of Manchester.
I think it's part of a wider process that's been taking place over the last few years, which slowly but surely is making people more mindful of climate change. It's starting to get the attention of the media and the front pages of the newspapers, but climate change is starting to become an issue that people talk about on an everyday level, and it's transcending different types of people with different backgrounds, and climate change has become something that we're all gradually becoming aware of as something that we need to tackle in some way. The challenge is whether, as individuals, people feel that they personally are the people who should be doing something about climate change. All of the environmental psychology research suggests that they perceive the problem as of such magnitude that they leave it to governments and to big institutions to do something about. What can we do as individuals? They feel that there's very little they can do in and of themselves.
Do you mean that in this context people will say to themselves, well, I do think aircraft are probably a bit bad for the environment, but my 1 or 2 little flights a year probably doesn't change much?
That's right. And I think to change that is going to take a little bit more than a camp for climate change. It will take an integrated strategy, most probably led by government in partnership with other institutions, to try and to change behaviour. You see, environmental psychology research suggests that behaviour is multiply determined and is often very complex and therefore difficult to change. But there are a number of actions and a number of strategies that the government could put in place which might help to bridge this connection between the individual and the environment and between their attitudes and behaviours. Something as simple as trying to increase people's awareness of the consequences they're flying by putting a carbon label on your ticket or your boarding pass. Why not make it very clear the environmental consequences of your choice of choosing to fly rather than taking the train or an alternative transport use on something as everyday as the ticket itself or your boarding pass? We know that people have to sit in a confined space and wait to get on the airplane for a prolonged period of time. It is a great opportunity to get them to think about the environmental consequences of their actions.
You seem, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you seem a little sceptical that this camp is going to achieve much beyond, if you like, raising awareness. That may be a laudable goal in itself.
Well, raising awareness is a very important stage towards changing behaviour and creating an enduring shift in behaviour. But it's only one stage, and the environmental psychology theory and research suggests that in and of itself it will be insufficient to change behaviour. For example, over the last 10 years there have been a range of awareness-raising campaigns, often funded by DEFRA and the government, trying to make people more aware so that they would change their behaviour. And what I think most people have realised at this point is that making people more aware is important, but in and of itself it won't make the difference, because there are so many other kinds of factors which shape whether behaviour takes place in different ways. And those are things to do with the behaviour is convenient, whether it's prestigious and glamorous, whether it's costly or inexpensive. And if you don't sort out those issues in tandem with dealing with the issue of awareness of consequences, then it won't have the desired impact in the long term.
Environmental psychologist Dr. Patrick Devine-Wright from the University of Manchester.